All right. Well, my name again is Donnie Jackson. I'm the editor of IWCE's Urgent Communications. Thank you for coming today. And our speaker today is TJ Kennedy. I'm sure all of you know he is the acting executive director for FirstNet. No matter what you think of FirstNet, and Lord knows it seems like everyone has an opinion, it's a huge task, and a lot of people have to come together and to really make it successful. People have to look at it from different angles. Fortunately for FirstNet, TJ's got experience from all kinds of different angles. He's been a firefighter, he's been a paramedic, he's worked in the private sector, and he's worked with federal and local and state levels in helping secure the Salt Lake Olympics. Really cool resume. But I've known TJ for a while now, and what always strikes me is his passion and his drive to get things done. And I don't know where he gets the energy, especially the last couple of years. I mean, I can barely write about what he's doing and keep up with it. He's actually having to fly around and talk to everybody. One of the best parts about my job is I get to talk with people, and we have a passion about things and really believe in what they're doing, and really good people. And so please welcome one of the really good people, TJ Kennedy.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here today. Unfortunately, I'm between you and lunch, so I'll make sure I'll try to keep it to a reasonable amount of time. What's so great about IWCE and being able to get everybody here together is a lot of what you saw in that video. Chief Harlan McEwen is in the audience here today. Chief McEwen and the work that they've done with the Public Safety Advisory Committee is invaluable to FirstNet. The number of single point of contacts, looking at Bill Schreier, looking at Ray Lear, who were in that video, who I know are in the room here today as well. The amount of passion that people have to make FirstNet successful, to make this vision of a nationwide public safety broadband network actually work, is just so critical. There's no way possible any one agency, any one department can make FirstNet succeed on its own. You absolutely have to have public safety, police, fire, and EMS agencies, all the different key stakeholders with brilliant technical expertise that we have in the room here today, as well as across the country, that we meet at every one of these consultation discussions and have follow-up with. It's about building a network that helps that next generation of public safety and this generation of public safety really take advantage of the technology that already exists. One of the great things as we looked at that video is just there are so many different ways that broadband can improve the safety and the security and the implementation and the actual communications between public safety, police, fire, and EMS across the board, that really the end result of getting this network in place is going to be invaluable to public safety. One of the things that you hear quite often as we go out and talk about this is really making sure that we continue to explain why we're doing it, what are the key elements that are going to make it successful. I'm going to talk a bit about that today. Ryan, if you go to the next slide here, we've been talking about a roadmap. About a year ago, we went out at the New York board meeting. Chief Dowd held us at NYPD, and we talked about some key things we needed to accomplish in this next year. And we've been doing exactly what we said we were going to do. We wanted to start formal consultations and take it from just a number of big outreach meetings and really hunker down and get a schedule out there, put out a checklist in April of 2014. We put a checklist out as well as an initial consultation package to all 56 states and territories. We've received most of those back. We actually have a very active map that gets updated at least weekly and often daily on our website. You can go and look at the consultations that have occurred, more that are occurring, and follow up and where every state is in that particular process. But today is actually our 17th consultation. And every single week we're going to continue to knock off additional consultations as well as the different ways that we can consult. A lot of it happens in in-person meetings and discussions, but it also happens by putting out public notices. The public notice we put out in September received 63 responses, a lot of great feedback, a very open and transparent process. We put out another public notice last week. I expect we'll get a lot of responses to the 56 pages of information that we put out there. And this is a process we've chosen to take on so that we can be very open on some additional interpretations as well as ask questions and engage industry, engage all of the public safety community, engage states in the process, Half the states actually responded to the first public notice. I hope we get even more this time. I actually emailed all the states asking them to please respond to the public notice. I think it's a very important part of our communication and being able to make sure that we're listening. It's great to see at this conference this week that a large portion of the states, the single point of contacts and their staff are actually here. It's a great opportunity for me and the FirstNet team. We have folks that are engaged in sessions all day today and part of tomorrow, and really want to make sure that we have that opportunity to interact, not just when we go out to individual states, but at events like this where we can share terrific information. Back in September, we put out a 13th RFI, a lot of good information gathering. We also put out a draft statement of objectives for the nationwide network. That draft statement of objectives is a very broad piece, but also very important in that it shows how FirstNet wants to go about making sure we meet the objectives while leveraging what industry can bring. And it's very important because we can be super specific and limit too much, and we really want to make sure that we can have innovation come to the table and present the best options. There's more than one way to build this network. There's more than one way to deploy this network. And we want to make sure that we get the best options for the best value for public safety. And so because of that, we've started very broad. We're taking lots of input, and we're going to continue to mold that. And I think what you're going to see over the next 6 to 12 months is that we continue to take a lot of input. We continue to engage actually in more direct ways over the next 6 months, and that we come out with a very detailed RFP that will be something that both industry and public safety can respond to. And so if we go to the next slide for a minute, I think it's important what's coming in the future. And I kind of call this the phase 2 of what we're doing in the strategic roadmap and the road to implementation. I'm not sure if everybody in the room is aware, but we have regular discussions with the single point of contacts. We have monthly conference calls, we have quarterly webinars, and actually next month, April 14th and 15th, we're bringing all 56 of the state single point of contacts together out in Reston, Virginia, where our headquarters is. And we're going to go ahead and have 2 full days of detailed discussion. Those kinds of discussions, I think, are invaluable to the FirstNet team. We recently had some key discussions, both via webinar and in person, about some of the data collection and other key elements that we're moving into with Sleep Phase 2 coming up. And those discussions I thought were terrific for me, and I got a lot of feedback from the single point of contacts that it was valuable for them to be able to ask a lot of questions, get a lot of detail from FirstNet. So we're going to continue to do that and have a lot of hands-on approach to working closely and listening, as well as sharing of information. Industry days, so speaking of sharing of information, right now we're looking to do an industry day coming up in April. A lot of good information that will come out on that. We'll be advertising it on our website as well as through FedBizOps, so more information to come. I imagine a lot of the industry folks in the room will be quite interested in that and many others. So I think that industry day will be a great way for us to continue to put out information. And we'll have more than one industry day. So there's not just one coming up, but there'll be more. We're continuing to ramp up our consultation and outreach teams. We add additional personnel. We have some key regional folks coming on board. We're leveraging other parts of both government and the private sector to really focus on consultation and outreach. We'll talk a bit about the numbers in a moment, but we literally have been, every week and almost every day, have somebody in a different state trying to help share the message, answer questions, and provide more definitive information. We also continue to work very closely with the PSAC. Chief McEwen and all of the members of the PSAC have been tremendous in taking on some really important issues. Just in the last few months, besides setting up a tribal working group, besides setting up the early builder working group, they've taken on important issues like priority preemption. They've also taken on the issues focused on hardening, what's practical to implement, and where's the best cost value benefit from different elements with that. And lastly, they're looking at devices. A lot of work yet to come before we get detailed on devices. There's some questions even in our public notice that people want to look at related to devices. But the PSAC is really going to give great advice, I believe, as they have in the past, this year with some really important topics. Just the operational elements that go into priority preemption is pretty incredible. And I think that's an enormous task. And I want to thank the volunteers in the PSAC who have volunteered to really tackle that issue and give advice to FirstNet. We couldn't do this without them. And it's also hard to get that kind of feedback unless people really dedicate the time. So I want to thank the executive committee of the PSAC for taking that on and sharing it with the whole PSAC and getting volunteers to really do that and make that happen. As you heard from our hearing last week, and if you were in any of the sessions today, Anna Gomez just talked about it in the previous session, we're really pushing for a final RFP at the end of the calendar year. This is a really critical thing for us. To do that, we have to share as much information as we can and get feedback in the process. And I really urge all of you to come to the public notice next week or come to the board meeting next week and listen in. Whether you're by webinar or whether you come in person, I think it's important that you see the great engagement we're going to have with the board. We'll be talking more about the proposal to come forward and sharing as much information as we can. We have to do that at the same time, but it will happen with some of the key elements happening at the board meeting next week. I want to talk a little bit here about state consultations. You saw in the video we went through that state consultations are an important input for FirstNet. I'll say they're a critical input. And even if it wasn't in the Act, it's a great thing for all of us to do. One, because there's a lot of differences between every state. Ray Lear, who's here, state of Maryland went first. I appreciate his dedication to do that. Different issues come up in every single one of these meetings. I've been to a number of them. I can't get to all of them. But the kinds of issues that come up in Oregon, the kinds of issues that come up in Maryland are very different than the kinds of issues that come up in Nebraska. And every one of them needs a public safety broadband network to be able to improve the way that they communicate, both with video, with text, with data in general, with voice. But at the same point, they have a different set of terrain. They have a different set of rural and urban issues. And every one of those is going to really take a different plan that gets to that overall effect of a state plan that will work between FirstNet and the states to meet the needs of that particular state. I can't say enough that these meetings are important to also work through the public notices and the draft RFPs and things like that we put out going forward. All of them will be able to be incorporated into these discussions and consultations, as well as us going back out to states and getting input. And so during these kinds of meetings, it's important not just to talk about the big picture future, but also how that will be impacted as we go through a procurement. So this year, we're focused really on just two major things. They're huge. Back to Donnie's comment on how busy the team is. Our team in general, folks who have come on board, aren't afraid to work day and night and weekends and to travel quite often. And that's a good thing because we're not getting a whole lot of sleep. But what's important about that is that they're going out to the states and talking about those updates that we have. And the two big things with the RFP and with the consultations is there's a lot of feedback that goes between these two. When we talk about getting information, the SLEEP Phase 2 and the data gathering that needs to happen on public safety users and all the different elements that go into that, that helps us feed into the actual acquisition process. It makes the acquisition a better acquisition. So hopefully we are asking for what public safety needs. We're getting responses to that are going to give a complete nationwide network and allow us to work state by state with the differences that need to be in there. And to do that in a reasonably quick period of time. Speed of deployment is an important issue. One of the things I see when I go out and talk to police chiefs and I talk to fire chiefs, and they actually understand what FirstNet is going to be and what the nationwide network is going to be, they just ask, how quickly can I get it? It's the most common question I get. When is it going to be turned on? When can we make this work? It's something they want to have. It's something public safety has asked for a very long time. So as we work through this year, we continue to go through consultations, continue to go through the acquisition process. You'll see that these are a parallel process. They're not sequential. We literally go back and forth between them. We'll actually be doing some state consultations at the same time in different states over the next few weeks, starting to double down on a number of the key meetings that we're having, because there's so much information to both share and to gather as we move through the rest of 2015 to be able to do this in a rapid way. One of the other things we're trying to do is focus on timelines. It's hard when you don't control every step of the timeline, but I think it's really important for us to be able to give as much information out as possible. So we'll be bringing to the board next week some key elements on timelines, at least for 2015 and going into 2016. We're talking about the key timelines to get the network deployed. We heard a bit of this come up during the Senate hearing. Lots of desire to obviously get the network out there. We're going to continue to focus on those kinds of big picture timelines, but also the details that will help you plan for the future. When we talk about having a network built and having the users be able to get on that network, a lot of states and others plan their spending 1-2 years ahead of time, typical budget cycles for different states and how they look at that. So it's things they have to plan for in the future. Also, when they look at other communications, it's about what can they leverage and what do they need to do now versus what do they need to do in 2 years. So all I can say is that when we're out doing consultations, we're hearing from the states, we're hearing all of the differences that are there. I'm amazed by how different agencies across the country work in very different ways and leverage different tools. And we're going to continue to do that as we go forward. So as we move through the rest of the states this year, I encourage you to get involved. If you're from states and you're here today, please attend those consultations. Encourage others in your state, both rural, suburban, urban, to attend. Please, if you're relying on public safety for your emergency management mission or other missions that you might have, really try to get involved. You will only get out of the FirstNet network and the consultation process what public safety in the states actually put into this process. It takes time and energy to get folks together. A lot of times there's politics that go on from the city, county, state, federal level across the country. But at the same point, I find it's all about relationships at the end of the day. And getting people together and getting them to get in one room and talk about the future of their communication needs is really what consultation is about. So we're going to continue to do that. It's important. I want to move now on to use cases. One of the things that comes out of consultation are some of the specific things that we can learn from at FirstNet to build a better acquisition and to build a better network. As part of that, when we're in these consultation sessions, we're getting great individual experiential events that happen, sometimes every single year. The Kentucky Derby is a good example. We had a great discussion with Maryland about the Preakness. These kind of events that draw 100,000 people or a large number of both public and public safety to the same kind of area are often the same exact times when some of the commercial networks and other things they rely on don't meet their needs. And it really helps us to kind of walk through and see what kinds of applications, like in Maryland where they're looking at patient data and what they need to do with EMS, to be able to share that while they're in a highly congested area of wireless communications. And what would be different if they had a network that had priority preemption? We also talk about the use of both permanent terrestrial networks and what can be brought in from a deployables perspective to be able to look at how can you add capacity when you need to add capacity to those unique events. The other thing we can do is look at Burning Man. Look at some of these events that only last a few days or a few weeks and typically located in areas that are of rural areas, as an example in Nevada. There's not a lot of terrestrial infrastructure in places where some of these events happen. So we have to look at what's the most cost-effective way to provide coverage, but also not build such a large terrestrial network in some areas that it's not going to pay for itself. The operations and maintenance might be better well spent bringing the network to that area for that 1 week every year. Other events